Hey guys, what's going on? This is Roth and Chris to talk a little True Blood series finale.
Let's dig in. This
Let's
was so
dig
much
in.
fun. No, it wasn't.
Well, let's start with the finale, but let's say first and foremost, like we came into True Blood first season or so as fans of the show,
Yeah.
right? Like it was a lot of fun, Southern fried fun, right? Like
Yeah.
cool vampire soap, well done. Now let's skip ahead a few years to the finale and talk about what went wrong.
I mean, so much went wrong. I want to talk a little bit. Let's stay positive and talk about what
Good.
went right
Good.
in this particular finale, because then after that, we'll be able to tee off. So what did you like about this particular finale?
I'll tell you what I liked, which is probably going to be the most controversial element of the finale and the thing that a lot of people are really going to hate. Now, I do not think that Bill's decision to kill himself, right, was one that made a lot of sense for his character. And I think that points to what we'll dig into as one of the flaws of the series over the last several years, which is that there has been no character consistency.
Right.
Characters change based on the plot, week to week, season to season. It is so erratic.
Yeah.
However, what I did appreciate about the finale is that because they'd been belaboring the point and leading up to it and building up to it and building up to it, at least they went through with it. I thought for a minute there was going to be a magical out and he was going to turn human.
Well, it did seem like they were setting it up for a magical out. And to my mind, if I were Bill, I would just have waited to see how the illness played out, actually. Because, you know, he was starting to turn human or whatever. It seemed like he was getting warmer. They made all these allusions to him turning human. But he's like, nah, I want to kill myself.
I think that that's why
weird.
they, again, like what they do so often, I feel like on this series is almost like retcon things. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And they're like, okay, like this whole time it's just been about Tara's abusive mother, but really, like we're gonna tug at your heartstrings in this really overtly manipulative way by like bringing in this whole other storyline about her abuse and
You know, in
forgiveness.
screenwriting class, they always tell you to not fall in love with your characters and not like, you know, you should put your characters through the paces.
Yeah.
And, you know, here we are at the end of the series, and it's not like Game of Thrones. Like, people who should have died long time ago for the story, for all these reasons, were still alive at the end. And so you basically had this, like, whole lobby full of people, like, milling around, like, what do I do in the finale, you know? And that's what it seemed like for, like, the last 4 or 5 years, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, I think too, so like with Bill, they brought in this whole manipulative story suddenly about like I am now after all these hundreds of years and like declaring my everlasting love for Suki, who I say I love more than anybody ever, right? I'm thinking about my kids and my past, and I want to be dead with them now, all of a sudden, right now. Like now is the moment that I want that to happen, which didn't make a lot of sense, but at least they went through with it and they didn't go for the magical out where like they were happy together. Although they did have that like happily ever after sequence.
Well, there was a magical out, but it was always for Suki because the series was all about Suki's needs and how she was the most important person ever of all time, and everybody in town was in love with her apparently.
Yeah, you almost think like if you were to look at the series as if it was the fantasy of a total narcissist, megalomaniac. Like it would actually then make sense. Where if like there was just this girl who was so crazy that she literally thought that the whole universe revolved around her.
But I think, you know, one of the problems that exists, and it speaks to the fact that they kept all these characters around and they didn't like in people's storylines and they kept trying to do things that everybody wanted to see. I feel like over time it just played in way too much to people's fan service.
I think so too. I think that was the biggest problem because like I said, I think that I still enjoyed the series longer than many people did, where I thought that season 1 was tight and like I said, just a ton of fun and really well constructed in terms of like there's this crazy event in the world and like how is this small town, just this one little pocket of the world going to deal with it?
Yeah.
Kind of an interesting premise. And then it started to get a little unwieldy and more soap-like. But I still thought that a lot of the side characters were great and often more fun to watch than the main characters.
For sure.
And their storylines, like when it hit big, when it swung big, and when it missed, it really missed. But when it hit, there were some great moments. And then, it just got so caught up in the idea of Bill and Suki and trying to not jump the shark, but then it just went bananas.
Yeah, it just did. Well, Bill becoming a god and all these things. And I feel like every impulse for this show was we have to put these two people into contact so that they can, have a love scene, so they can have sex,
Right.
Like, and it was to a ridiculous degree. Like, they had to, like, have Jason and Eric hook up at some point, and you're like, wait a second, this makes no sense whatsoever for the story. It's basically somebody's slash fiction playing out on screen, and why do we need to do this? It serves no purpose outside of,
And I think
to titillate,
as it were. I think that was the big thing for me, is that the reason that the series, I don't think they ever really did develop Sookie. I mean, we're kind of joking that she's this megalomaniac, but like, I don't think that they ever really did develop that character, which is too bad because that's their main character, and she had the potential to be a really cool character, but she never really like self-actualized. Except in those last moments, she did at least make a decision for herself, like, no, I'm going to keep this thing. I'm going to keep this gift.
Yeah.
But the other big thing is, like, again, the only character that was consistent throughout the series was Pam.
Yeah.
That is the only one. Everybody else kind of like, especially Bill, was beholden to whatever crazy plot point they wanted to do. Like, so one season he's like almost a sociopath, and he doesn't care about her at all. And then it's like she's his sun and moon, you know what I mean? And he can't do enough for her, and he's actually led a rebellion in this, like, and all of this. You're like, what are you? Who is this person?
This last season was a total mess. Like, some of the lowest points I've seen from a season, and just really boring. Like, there were a lot of episodes that went by that were like, oh wow, there's just like no content in this episode, and I felt like I always kind of think about like what the actors are feeling like at the end of something like this, because in one way it's like you're still with all your friends and you're making this cool thing, but in another way you have to be like, this is not what we started off as.
Right.
This isn't like where we were
Do
in
you
the beginning.
think they know, though? I truly wondered that, because I see them tweeting like true to the end and this, that, and I know it's meant so much probably to their lives, and I can totally respect that. But I wonder if they do know how far the quality has sunk.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to belabor it because I can't speak for other people, but I just think about those things and I'm like, wow, if this was me, like, I think I would have a sense of the fact that, like, at one point we were doing this one thing and now it's kind of like Passions with, Passions, the soap opera, if you guys don't know what that is.
But I don't even mind the soapy elements. I think that what I draw umbrage with is like the total like schizophrenic nature of the writing and the plotting and the characterization. None of it made sense. And I think what I also draw umbrage with is that what's crazy to me is that for a show that's dealing with, and I thought in the first season dealt with very interestingly, the idea of vampires being not beholden to a moral code like we are, then became very moralistic. Now, I know that there's all the cussing and the sex. That's there.
It needed to be there, honestly.
It needed to be there.
It wouldn't have been on the air for so long if it hadn't been for
with the nudity
all
and with
stuff.
the sex and all of that. But this is what I mean, like, the sense of morality was so black and white, right? Like, so to the point where when we wanted to think that Bill was a good guy, we had to see him as not just a normal human being that was basically a good guy, but he had to be so heroic, you know what I mean? And it got too big that way. Like, the evil was so evil, and then the good was so good, but it was the same character too.
But even within that morality, we were talking about this a little bit before, there's all these like weird things where I just don't feel like everything was thought through very well. So, for instance, Bill is like, I don't want to, subject you to this life where we can't have kids and, blah, 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 you're not going to be happy with me. But he's totally happy to, and actually kind of forcing Jessica into that same life. Like,
exactly.
So
it makes
weird.
no sense. It makes no sense that in the same breath that he's like, I can't do this to you, Sookie. I can't consign you to this life or myself because it'll never work. But I will force a shotgun wedding on my vampire daughter and her human brainwashed, recently returned one day ago mate.
I have to say also, I hated Hoyt coming back. He had like so much swagger and such a chip on his shoulder when, like, the cool thing about Hoyt in the beginning was that he was kind of a sweet guy and he was like a little innocent and everything. He comes back from Alaska. And by the way, his mind was wiped in between.
Yeah.
I don't even understand how he comes back from Alaska and he's all like this hardened, like, look at me, I'm a stud now kind of thing. I was like, what happened there?
That's what I'm saying about and I think you're right. It is about fan service because they just were like, well, it doesn't matter if this makes sense for everything we've set up for this character. And it doesn't even matter if this makes sense for what we set up for the character 2 minutes ago in terms of Bill being like, I can't do this, but you can. And how antiquated, like, I want to know that you're taken care of by Hoyt. Okay. She's going to be taking care of him. She's the vampire. Like, but then all they want to do is to get to that moment where they're having a wedding and they hope that they're pulling at heartstrings. But you can't because you can only pull at our heartstrings when we're buying into it. And I loved Jessica and Hoyt. Like, I loved that dynamic initially.
At first, and then they ruined it completely. There's no way, there was actually a way that you could have kept them as like a sweet couple, you know, over time. Never done the Jason thing. Like, that was weird in and of itself. It's like, because he had the same sort of like love for Hoyt that I think he, you know, like that was his actual love in his life was, hey, this is my guy and I'm sticking up for him all the time. Not in like, you know, like romantic way, but in a sort of, this is like where the center of Jason's love is centered. And then to have him betray that was weird. And then the long circuitous path back to
get here doesn't make much. Well, because it wasn't a long circuitous path. It was 2 episodes in which that they decided like this is just going to happen and you're going to swallow it.
And more on the Bill tip, I will say, it was extra jarring that like 3 episodes before they got back and pledged their everlasting love for each other or whatever, he was already just like, he didn't seem to care about Sookie. Even this season.
I know.
It's not like they started this season and they're like, we got to get back on track with Bill and Sookie. It was like 3 episodes before the finale, they were like, whatever.
I think because, again, they were manufacturing ways to keep them apart so that tension remained, but it was just so poorly conceived and poorly executed. And then this is, frankly, the crazy thing, like that final shot, like, of, okay, like, everybody's together and it's happily ever after in the sunshine and light and, like, you know, barbecues and babies and whatever, and it's like, do you remember that crazy year when everything fell apart and the world ended and... Like, you'd be in a nut house if you had the amount of trauma that this woman had over a year. You know what I mean? Like, you would just be in the nut house. Like,
but Sookie, it's par for the course for her because she's happy. I mean, she's like, oh, hey, I've got a baby now. This is the whole plan.
It's all, and that is, I think, the final sort of like period on the end of that sentence where they're like, they just gave up, you know, and trying to actually tell a compelling story, and then they just have sort of like tropes in there, like that montage of it's okay, everything's fine now, happily ever after. Okay, cool, but you started out this series as like something pretty interesting in terms of like it wasn't that black and white.
Well, one last thing I want to say about Sookie in particular is when you look at sort of her timeline and her relationships and the things that happen with her on this show, she is like, Alcide dies one day and she's in Bill's bed the next day. It's like there are some really morally questionable things going on with this woman, and it's like if you look at it in terms of exactly like what it is, like how many, you know, sort of like people, you know, I think they kind of try to explain it away like she's a fairy and her blood is tasty or whatever. But it's like you think of how many people she's like fell deeply, madly in love with over the course of the series. It just doesn't, it's hollow in the end. Like, you don't feel like that dude at the end of the table is really gonna, like, last for her.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think that ultimately for me, like, True Blood, because like I said, this is sounding really negative, this video, but I really loved it.
In the
like,
beginning,
the first
for sure.
season, and I think I enjoyed it, you know, even a little after that, but it's a missed opportunity, and that's what it really started to feel as it fell apart, where I could still see the good elements and the strong characters. You know, there was some good acting on the show. There were some great moments. There was potential for really fun characters. There was some really funny dialogue. Eric and Pam was always really fun to watch. I personally loved Jason. Lafayette was a standout those first few seasons. But they lost their way. It seemed like they went into a tailspin in terms of the story. They never really got it back.
Never got it back.
All right, guys, that's what we think. Our long-winded arrival at They Never Got It Back, Crash and Burn. But what did you guys think? Did you love it till the end? Were you true to the end? Did you think, were you out long ago? Leave your thoughts below. And for all things TV, because True Blood is over, keep it locked right here to IGN.